My students weren't remembering anything. They weren't making connections. They didn't seem to understand what universe we were even operating in. And every class felt like starting over. And they couldn't write. It was taking them an entire class period to write one paragraph, like an entire 90 minutes. And some asked for more time. But what really got me is they seemed to really need checklists, like a step by step process. They wanted me to tell them exactly what to do. And at first, I really wanted to resist that because my goals are about complexity and nuance and making connections and seeing patterns. And I didn't want to reduce everything to a checklist because really that's not what good reading and writing is. But the more I looked at what they were actually struggling with, the more I realized that maybe I could give them what they needed, the safety of steps and the clarity of structure while still staying true to my real goals. So I'd known about flipping for, I don't know, years, right? Almost a decade at this point. I read the Bergman and Sam's book about flipping the English classroom. I had gone to ISTE that year and bought it like at ISTE. I used videos during the pandemic when we were all virtual. And when I came back to in person, I didn't keep it. It just didn't seem like the right tool for the right time. Then in October of this year, a colleague mentioned videos in a PD, and she was using them for absent students and reteaching. And something clicked for me. It wasn't a new idea, but I had different problems now. So I was thinking about my students. Some of them couldn't hold on to information. Some of them really needed more of the invisible made visible. And there were students who needed more structure to access the kind of complexity that I was looking for. And I thought video could probably do that. Not in the way I used it during COVID, but as a way to build schema, which is what I'm really working on for this year. I was thinking it could be a way to show the moves that they would try during class. So I pulled that tool out of the vault. So here's where I am going into 2026. I'm using videos to build schema, like that background knowledge students need to make sense of what they read. Last year, when we were in a staff meeting, someone was talking about how building background knowledge is really one of the main skills of reading. Like it's more important than decoding. And that really got me thinking. And I decided I wanted to make that the focus of my year. So what does that look like? For me, it's things like here's what science looked like in the Romantic period, so you can bring that into your reading. And I'm using videos to make that invisible visible. Here's what to look for when you're analyzing imagery. Here's how to trace a pattern across a poem. The moves that expert readers make automatically, I'm trying to show them in these videos, try to show them those moves. And they get the structure from the video. I'm really making it step by step and telling them what to look for. And then they come in and apply it in class with me there on real text. And I'm really trying to break things down and make the invisible visible in ways that I hadn't in the past. And it's actually working. So, what follows is 25 lessons, how I got here. So, 25 lessons for 2025. So, let's get into it. All right, so here's what pushed me to flip. I tried it earlier in the year with Macbeth, and I wasn't even thinking about it as a flip, but I assigned a video to watch Act Two. We were watching Macbeth in class. This was like first real unit of the year. We watched Act One, and my whole thinking was we're going to watch it and then go back and analyze. So we watched Act One together, and then I assigned Act Two for homework. I put it on quizzes, Wayground. And then I gave them another for Act Five. So watch the videos, I embedded questions, come to class ready to move on. And I realized something because not a lot of people, well, okay, like two-thirds. Like two-thirds of students watched, but a third didn't. And if you think about class makeup, a third of the class not doing it, it's like 10 out of 30, right? Math. But it's pretty significant. And I started thinking, well, if students will not even sit and watch this film, like watch a video, which is pretty short and easy, answer the questions that go along with it, where I'm helping them to understand what's happening in the play, the likelihood that they'll read is even lower. And I really appreciated having those kinds of statistics or like diagnostic real data about what students were actually doing. So, what I was thinking is like if they wouldn't watch this video, I guess they maybe didn't understand that I would be able to see if they did it or not, or even attempt it, but whatever. Like students were not even attempting it. And I was thinking, if they won't watch this video, they certainly won't read when I have no way of knowing if they definitely did it. So I knew before I got to Frankenstein later in the year, I had to solve this problem of getting students to do something at home so that we were able to be productive in class. And I had to figure out how to get them doing something consistently. I had to actually figure out how to get them to read. Earlier in the year, I'd given them a reading and I suspected that a lot of people hadn't read, but I wasn't sure. So anyway, I was trying to figure out this problem. So I looked into the future and I saw sitting and listening to the audio together. And I knew that that was not how I wanted to spend my life. It meant that we would have little time for doing anything else. And I just knew that wasn't a way to live. So for years, the homework problem was students don't do it. And the way that I responded was more accountability. So reading quizzes, homework checks, points. And if I'm being honest, none of it worked because the homework didn't obviously matter to students. And what I learned this year is good homework is homework that obviously matters tomorrow. That is something that I have really taken to heart and have been thinking about with every assignment that I have given students this year. So, not this will help you eventually, or you'll need this for the test, but you'll need this tomorrow, like next class. When you walk in, we're going to use it. And it's immediately clear to me whether you did it or not. So what I've been doing is giving students these videos, and when they come to class, I have a frame for what happens in tomorrow's class. And when they don't, they're sometimes visibly lost. It means that they can't interact with class in the same way. And I think that that's actually good homework. It's not what I would have said years ago because we don't want to penalize students for not doing homework when we think about like everything in a grand scheme. But when we start thinking about why we might give homework, what it has been in the past is practice. And if students don't need the practice, then it starts to get this weird kind of equation of like some students need the practice, others don't. If some do the homework, how should it be penalized? Like that kind of thing. But thinking about the work that they do at home in a different way has really changed my classroom. So having homework where the consequence is immediate and obvious has actually been the best homework that I've had in a long time, maybe ever, because it actually matters and students can see that it matters. And this type of homework actually shows that I care about their time. So, lesson three is this isn't reinventing teaching, it's packaging what I already knew. So, I want to say this early because it changes how you hear everything else. I recognize that this isn't new. I'm not doing revolutionary teaching here. I'm not doing dramatically different activities. I'm doing what I already knew I should be doing, but in a package that actually holds together better. Because I was already planning carefully. I knew I should build background. I knew I should protect class time for real work, and I knew homework should matter. I knew all this before. And the thing is that I wasn't able to do it consistently because there were always reasons to cut corners. It was usually time, all the other things that were put on my plate. So flipping isn't a new method. It's a structure that really forced me to do what I already knew every day in a system that actually holds all the things that I want from my students. So if you're watching this or listening to this and you're hoping for something really revolutionary, I don't have that. But what I do have is refinement. So, lesson four is building a shared vocabulary gives you something to point back to all year. Before I flipped any content, I made videos about writing. So, this was the first thing that I did. So, not new material, it was technically review, but I was giving them my language and frameworks, and that made a shared vocabulary that we could use. So, one of the things that I say to my students is make a bet worth making. That's one of my phrases. And now students actually echo it back to me. When they're writing and when they're revising, when they're talking to each other, they're using this language. And it becomes part of that class canon. and we have a shared vocabulary that we can point back to. And I realize if I'm going to reference ideas all year, if I'm going to say, remember when we talked about X, then X has to actually exist somewhere and it needs to be documented and accessible in something that we build together. I think about what I was doing before this year, and I would want this for my classroom for me to be able to be like, remember what happened in September? But if you do that, students don't actually remember what happened in September. So it needs to be something that's like reinforced all year, starting with something that we can reference and go back to. The videos became the canon for me, and it's the foundation that we can keep building on because when it's recorded, I can literally point back to it. So I can say, like, go back to video 3, not remember when I said something about this a few weeks ago. Lesson 5 is isolating one concept per video makes the learning visible. So I've been working on this and making one concept per video, and that's the rule that I landed on for my classroom. So I'm not telling you everything about the Romantic period. I'm not giving you like an overview about everything that happened during that time period, but I'm looking at like, here's the Sublime, or here's negative capability, or here's how romantics use imagery patterns. So it's one concept named clearly and isolated. And what I learned is that this is making the learning map more visible to students. So before, I might have taught all these things in one lesson or spread it across several days. And students got the information, but they didn't necessarily know what they got, if that makes sense, because it like blurred all together. But now they know because they had the Sublime video. So they had the imagery patterns video. These are tools that I have now to give them. And they can see their own learning in a more organized way and see what they know and what they don't. So, one concept per video seems pretty simple, but really changed a lot of how my class appears to students. Lesson 6, good planning doesn't matter if students can't see the structure. And this goes with that previous one. And this one I think is a little bit hard for me to explain because I was already backwards planning. Like I've been backwards planning this whole time. It's not new. But what I learned is that good planning doesn't matter if students can't see it, if they can't see that structure. I could have like this beautiful unit architecture in my head with this really elegant through line with really intentional sequencing. But if students don't see it, it doesn't help them. And flipping, like making these videos for my students really made that planning visible because the videos make the structure explicit. Like, here's what we're learning, here's how it connects, here's why this comes before that. And students aren't just experiencing my good planning anymore, they can see it in a different way. They know where they are in the sequence and they know what's building towards what. So it's the same planning, but now it's visible. And that visibility really changes how students engage with it. One of the things that I'm doing is I'm having students take hard copy notes. I'm giving them a template. So they literally can go back to like video 1, video 2, video 3, whatever in the sequence, and they have all of their notes and they see how they work together. And I think that that also is something that really helps them to see the sequence and how everything works together, like what they're supposed to be taking away from the unit. Lesson 7, every video you make is an asset you keep. This is a lesson that I've learned this year has been an investment. The recording definitely takes time and planning takes time and building the system takes time. But what I'm thinking as I'm doing this, and I have to keep reminding myself that every video I'm making is an asset I get to keep. So next year, that Byronic Hero video exists, that Sublime video exists, the writing videos exist, and I don't have to make them again. So I'm building a library that grows. So this year is definitely an investment, and year 2 is going to be the return. So I guess I have to teach English 10 again next year, but year 3 is compound interest. So the building part, and I think this is true for everything, not just for building a video classroom library, but thinking about the work that you're putting in now as an investment for years in the future, I think is important. And thinking about what is disposable and what is an asset that you can keep. If you're building assets for every year after this one, then it helps to change how you're feeling about the classroom. And I'll say, like, when I look back at some of my years, I'm like, what was I even doing that year? Because everything that I did was very disposable. So thinking about assets and what I can bring forward to the next year. Lesson 8, one accountability measure doesn't work. You need the trifecta. So after Macbeth flopped, I tried different things. I tried just having them take notes on the video. I tried doing an in class flip where they did notes on the computer. I had a low completion rate when I just asked them to take notes. And then I realized if I was having them take notes on the computer, I needed to have them be able to access the computer whenever they used it. I tried just tracking who watched on Wayground and it was still not great. But what actually worked was the combination of those two. So having physical hard copy notes they filled out, plus the data to see who watched and for how long, also how they did on the embedded questions, plus the next day application. I had them immediately use what the video gave them. So that's the trifecta, having all three of those accountability measures working together. I think the notes alone they could skip or they could copy off a friend. The data alone, they might play it in the background, try to get AI to answer the questions. The application alone, they might fake it. But the three together was really where I have the physical artifact, I have the data, and then the next day they require it. And that combination of the three is what led to a higher completion rate of the actual work. So, lesson 9, physical artifacts cue preparation in a way that digital doesn't. And this surprised me because like I said, I tried having students take notes on the computer. Then I made hard copy note sheets. So I had them on paper and something they grab from the folder at the start of class or I pass them out. And that really changed their completion rate. I think there's something about the physical cue, like grabbing the paper, putting it in their folder, and then seeing it in the folder next to their other papers, when they put something else in, and then having something tangible to return to. So when I say like you can use your notes and most people pull out their paper, if you don't have it that's visible, you're visibly unprepared. And I think that's different from not having a digital document open when nobody is really looking at your screen. There's probably brain science here about physical artifacts and memory, but what I know for sure is that physical artifacts cue preparation in a way that the digital wasn't. So the paper matters. Don't skip it, apparently. Lesson 10 for me is repetition builds the expectation, and one day doesn't prove it matters. Okay, so the first week, some students didn't watch when I started giving these videos. And I think they were probably testing me and wondering if this would actually matter, if I would cover it anyway. I didn't. So one day of this matter doesn't prove anything because they've heard that before. But the expectation is in the repetition. So, yes, your homework matters today, and also today. Every single day, the video matters for class. So by week 3, most students were watching. I have a really great turn in rate right now. And I think it's because the pattern was established and every single day proved that the system was real. I think also they understood in the repetition the care that I was putting into their unit, and that mattered too. So the repetition is what builds the expectation. And I think if I'd given up on this was definitely like I don't know, endurance exercise for me, but proving it over and over again until they believe it, proving that I care enough to continue doing this and I care enough to keep holding them to doing this with me. Lesson 11, your fears about being on camera are bigger than student reactions. And I have to admit, I was afraid about this and I'd, I was afraid I'd do something weird. Like, I don't know what I would do, but I was afraid that they'd make fun of me. And I was afraid of seeing myself on video and cringing. But what I learned is that my fears were bigger than their actual reactions. I don't think the students care if I stumble or if my lighting is bad. They do care if my audio is bad, which it has been sometimes. So I had to get myself a new mic, but I don't think they're scrutinizing me in the way that I'm scrutinizing myself. I think they want to understand the content. And if the video is clear and helpful, that's really what matters. I don't think I said anything particularly weird, but honestly, even if I did, well, I don't know. I wanna say they wouldn't remember it, but maybe they would. But I say weird things all the time. But the fears about being on camera are bigger than I think the actual students' reactions. So just make the video. Lesson 12. Post COVID students have this skill. The barrier is lower than you think. Okay, so before COVID, watching videos and taking notes was a skill we really needed to teach. You may have done this before, like I had lessons where I would show students a TED Talk and I was explicitly telling them how to take notes on it. I don't know if that was a pretty standard assignment. I know that other people did it, but I don't think that this is really something that's as important. Students are more used to watching instructional content online, so they know how to pause, they know how to take notes while they're watching. They've done it, they go back, they change the speed. I expected to have to teach video watching skills, and I didn't really have to because they already had them, and they had them across like all of my classes. So if you're worried that your students won't know how to learn from video, I think you can give them more credit because post COVID, they've really got this. Lesson 13, visible unpreparedness is more motivating than invisible point loss. I had students who weren't doing homework before, and the points didn't motivate them. The threats didn't motivate them. But what motivated them actually is you can use your notes, and everybody pulls out their notes except for them. They're sitting there with nothing. That's visible and social. And that visible unpreparedness, it has been more motivating to them than the invisible point loss because the losing points happens later privately on a screen, and they're the only ones that know that it's happening and their parents, but that's a different story. But being the only one without notes happens now in front of everybody. So I didn't really design this to be about peer pressure, but that's part of why I think it works. When the preparedness is visible, more students participate and prepare. Lesson 14, the right system catches students the old system was losing. I have students who are really in a groove now who weren't before, and students who weren't doing homework under my old system and slipping through. I was losing them, and the system caught them. I think it's the combination that I have been talking about, the physical notes, the visible accountability, and that clear, immediate connection to class, and also the repetition. There's something about the system that has clicked for students who the old system wasn't reaching. I think it's like part of the regimen of it. And I can't tell you exactly which part did it. It might be different for different students, but the result is real that students who weren't doing homework are doing homework now. Lesson 15. When everyone has the pieces, you can see who can't make the connections. Before, when a student struggled, there were lots of possible reasons. Maybe they didn't understand the concept. They might not have the background knowledge. They might not have done the reading. I couldn't always tell why because there were too many variables. Now everyone has the pieces. They all watch the video and they're not pulling from background knowledge that they had from like history last year or something, some conversation they had with their friends or their family, something that I read. They all have it from this video. They all have the notes. They all have the background knowledge. So when someone struggles, I can see what's actually happening because I've eliminated the I don't have anything to pull from variable. If they have all the pieces and still can't make the connection, that tells me something different than if they never had the pieces at all. So when everyone has the pieces, you can really see who can't make the connection and then actually help them with that specific problem. Lesson 16, same activities, more consistent access to the thinking. So class doesn't feel dramatically different, honestly. We're still reading, still discussing, still writing, still analyzing, still the same things. The same activities, honestly, I've always valued. But what's different is that students are more consistently able to access the kind of thinking I'm hoping for. Before, some students couldn't do it, and others were lost because they didn't have the background or didn't do the preparation. So now more students can engage because they have that shared foundation and because the breadcrumbs are there. They have the same activities, but more consistent access to the thinking, and that's what's changed. We have this thing that we do as English teachers. We say, like, maybe students aren't cognitively ready for this. And I think a lot of it is that they just do not have the right schema and background information in order to access it at a level that we're asking. So why don't we just give it to them? Giving it to them has actually made a big difference. Lesson 17, consistent breadcrumbs get picked up more than sporadic ones. So this is what I was just saying. I'm leaving more breadcrumbs now. When I taught them about imagery patterns, I showed them trace the imagery across the poem. Where do you see similar images? What's happened? And I've seen students do it. They'll say, okay, here's imagery. What else do I see? Where else do I see something similar? So they're picking up those breadcrumbs. So if I mention something once and never return to it, it's more likely to disappear. But if I build it into every video, every class, multiple videos over the unit, then they can internalize it. So the system, in actually knowing what I'm going to say today and tomorrow and next week, helps me to build more of those breadcrumbs, and the system forces consistency. So I'm reinforcing the same frameworks. Every class applies the same mindset. Every assignment uses the same language. And then those consistent breadcrumbs get picked up, the ones that maybe were missed when they were done more sporadically. Lesson 18, knowing who's prepared changes how you walk into the room. So I honestly feel different going into class now because before I was trying to figure out who was prepared during the class period by reading their faces when they were taking my reading quiz, guessing or hoping, looking at the results and making judgments based on that. But now I know in a different way. I have data. I can see who watched or at least had it open, who took notes, who's ready compared to people that don't. Like I know who really definitely isn't ready. So I'm able to plan accordingly. And that really changes how I walk into the room because I'm not spending energy on uncertainty and I know what I'm working with before students walk into the door. Lesson 19, the system forced me to get organized in ways I wasn't before. So I'm more organized now than I have ever been. I know what I did last class period. I know exactly what absent students missed. I have a plan for makeup work. Before this, the makeup work was always a weak spot for me. So kids would miss class and I'd be fuzzy on exactly what they needed to do because it was like I planned for you to be in class and now you aren't. So what do we do now? But now I have a system because the system demanded it. So if I'm saying that class matters, which it does, students have to do class even if they're absent. So being organized to account for this is a side benefit I didn't really expect. I'm not going to pretend I have this completely figured out. The hardest part right now is the absent students because students are absent on different days and they miss different things. They make up work on different timelines. Some are really diligent and some aren't. And I have 1 to 3 students absent every class period, and that really adds up. And flipping creates an absent student problem you have to build a system for. I have a system now. It's better than it was, but it's still the thing I'm managing and it takes a lot of energy and I'm still refining it. But having a system for those students and getting them caught up is something that I've been working on. Lesson 20. AI can speed up feedback if you use it for pattern finding. Okay, so I've been using Notebook LM to look at student work. I haven't been using it to grade it, but to find patterns and see trends across the class. I upload a batch of paragraphs and I can quickly see what are the 3 things this class is struggling with, what's the pattern. And this helps me give more focused feedback. Instead of commenting on everything, I can address the 3 major trends I'm seeing, and it's helping me get the class level picture faster. I can also address the class level picture immediately before they get their individual feedback. Lesson 21, if you use language consistently, they'll use it back. So, like I said before, I've been using this line like make a bet worth making. That's my language and my phrase for taking a risk in your thesis and making a claim worth defending. And students use it now in their writing, in their peer feedback, in their conversation, because I am using it consistently in the videos and class and feedback. It's everywhere. So I have found that that is really important using the same consistent language and using the same vocabulary. And this is really about consistency and thinking about what are the frameworks that I want my students to understand by the end of the year and then just hammering those. It's in the videos, it's like I said in my feedback, I'm building it into my outlines and that helps me with consistency and repetition. So I have a list of things that I want to be sure that I'm looking at over the different units of the year. Lesson 22. Students vote with their behavior. Watch the data, not their faces. Okay, students don't generally tell you if they like something. Like sometimes they do. They're not generally going to just be like, "Oh, that was a great video, Miss Hicks." That's not how teenagers work. But they do vote with their behavior, and the data shows me that. So completion rates are up, way up from where they started. Students are watching, students are taking notes, they are coming prepared, and that tells me that the videos aren't terrible, and it tells me the system is working. Lesson 23, we're almost there. Writing speed increases when writing is expected and frequent. Okay, at the start of the year, I was taking my students, like I said, an entire class period to write one paragraph, so 90 minutes. That's not okay. Not if I want them ready for 11th grade. So I decided they needed to just write a lot more, and I needed to be there when they did it. So now when I say you have 30 minutes to write a paragraph, most of them can do it. And some of them can finish faster, and they're surprised with themselves. Their processing speed has gotten much, much faster. So flipping actually gave me the time to make writing happen in class frequently and with me there. And with me there is very important. Lesson 24, flipping creates time for the practice that actually matters. And this is related to the last one because what flipping has actually given me is time. It has given me time for students to read in class. It's given time for them to write in class, time for discussion that goes somewhere, and time for practice that actually matters because they are A, completing assignments in a more reasonable time frame because they are getting that repeated framework. And I'm also not giving them as much setup as I would have to because that is actually in the video. So the practice was getting squeezed because I had to give them a lot more of the setup to make that happen. So we'd start something and not finish it. I'd send it home, then either it wouldn't happen or it would happen with the AI and or I was unsure. But now the setup happens before class and the class is just straight practice, like reading practice, writing practice, thinking practice with me there where I can see it. And I think that shared knowledge base compounds because every video adds to what we can reference and every practice session builds on the last. So it's given more time for practice that actually matters, and that's a real win. Lesson 25 is the real lesson. So this is the 25th lesson from Flipping My Classroom to end 2025. And I think the real lesson is that this is not revolutionary. It's really refinement of practice. It's taking what I already knew about good teaching and putting it in a system that made me actually do it. So every day being more consistent. The answer wasn't something new. It did have like that one new angle, but the answer really was intentional practice and really thinking through the um, the schema that I wanted students to develop, what I was going to reinforce, how I was going to build it into my lessons, how it was going to work in practice. So the answer was just really being intentional, giving students intentional practice, and building my own intentional practice. Teaching gets better the same way everything gets better by doing it with intention over and over and refining and adjusting and showing up. And the system just made me practice intentionally and took away some of the shortcuts that I had been gradually putting in place for myself over the years. And it also made my structure really visible and forced consistency for me. So that's what I learned. And thanks for hanging out with me in 2025 and in this video. And here's to 2026.